Hi there. Are we ready? Well, thank you very much for coming. I hope everybody had a great holiday. Professor Solomon, Professor Karlan are here for the last of this semester's Yale at Gateway series. We're really fortunate that we have such outstanding Yale faculty come and talk to us. And of course, Professor Solomon, award-winning journalist, Professor Solomon, in here. I have a couple of housekeeping things I have to do. I have to tell you where the fire exits are. So there's 2 exits out there, and the 2 go into the courtyard. Those are the fire exits. I ask everybody, please sign in so we know how you heard about our events, because we are going to continue to present our Yale at Gateway series here next semester. So, yay, thank you. Oh, no.
Oh, that's...
Never let them see you sweat. But Professor Karlan is a very well-known behavioral economist, so that sounds really cool, doesn't it? But he does some really cool research. He's an often contributor to Freakonomics, which is really a lot of fun. If you haven't seen any of the Freakonomics segments or listened to them, please go listen to them. He's an expert on behavioral economics and also on charities and microfinancing and making available quality financing products to people that really wouldn't have that available to them. So that's really important work. A lot of his work is in the developing world. So how many people here are in like macro class, where we talk about income disparity and things like that? And so not only do, poor countries not have the ability to get funding, but there's a lot of consequences to that. So Professor Karlan is a great expert on what works in policy and what doesn't. So without further ado, I think I'll let you take it over.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you again and be
Good to see you too.
Interviewing you. This is one of the few people in the Yale at Gateway series whom I've actually interviewed for the PBS NewsHour. In fact, you were in 2 different pieces, and those are going to be the 2 different topics we're going to talk about today. So it's that time of year, and so both of these topics are relevant, and I think, in fact, that's how we timed it when we had you on the NewsHour. Mm-hmm. One, so Christmas, giving season, and so how do you give? To whom do you give? To what do you give? How do you evaluate foreign aid in general, charities in particular? Where should any of you who might be thinking about, well, at the end of the year I ought to make some contributions, where would I make them? So that's one topic. That'll be the first, I think, just chronologically, because the second one is New Year's. And that's New Year's resolutions and how do you keep them. And he's got some really interesting ideas about that as well. So I'm going to interview him for a little bit, then try to get you guys involved in asking him questions as well, and that's how we're going to proceed. So foreign aid, not a very big percentage of the U.S. budget. People think it's much bigger than it is, right?
That's right.
What percentage, do you know?
Ooh,
something less than 1, it's some fraction
tiny.
of a percent.
No, the general population in the United States grossly overestimates our aid certainly compared to other countries as what proportion of our GDP we give away.
So is foreign aid, are people right to be skeptical of foreign aid?
They're right to ask the question whether projects are working, whether particular ideas are effective or not. The question about, I think they're wrong in general to be skeptical of foreign aid, in the sense that it's not true that all foreign aid is bad and leading to bad things. The challenge is, or the kind of aha is to realize that it's the wrong question to ask, does foreign aid work? Because there's no simple answer to that. It's not a yes and it's not a no.
Doesn't it make people dependent, maybe?
Depends how it's done. So there's been very careful studies that say, okay, if it's done in this particular way, does it create dependency issues? And sometimes you get a yes and sometimes you get a no. But what we've learned is that there are particular issues where the answer is clearly yes, and that transcends. So let's just take a very concrete example. Bed nets, in bed nets that have been treated so that they can help kill off mosquitoes that transmit malaria.
Okay.
So it was a big debate for a long time.
This bed nets mean you go to sleep, you put
go to
this
sleep,
over you.
and it reduces child mortality, protects pregnant women who can also, if they get malaria, it's very bad. And it also actually helps your neighbors. If you have this bed net up, it actually helps your neighbors as well because it kills off mosquitoes that go over to your neighbor.
You mean so the little mosquitoes come, they try to,
exactly,
and then they hit the bed net, and then
yep, and
it has poison on it.
It has poison. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
poison
how it
for
works.
mosquitoes, not for the people.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
It was a big debate for a long time. Give it away for free or sell it.
Right.
And
but why would it not be better to give it away for free? Because then it's for free, right?
Well, a lot of people made the argument you made that maybe it creates dependency, and if you give it away for free, maybe people will then expect lots of things to be for free and expect it to be for free forever. Mm-hmm. Why not make it so that people buy it? And that way also, if people, one argument would say, actually, if you give it away for free, people won't use it because it's just free, and then they won't value it.
It's cheap.
And so they'll just be like, well, I didn't pay for it. Maybe they might not think through that consciously, but subconsciously, that we're more likely. The idea is that we're more likely to use something if we've paid for it. Uh-huh. So that's a theory. Mm-hmm. The real question is now empirically, does that hold water or not? And so there was tests done by. This wasn't my research. But this was conducted through Innovations for Poverty Action, which is headquartered just a couple miles down the road. Set up a test in Kenya where some people got it for free and other people paid for it. It was a little more complicated than that, but the basic heart of the test was to find out what happens to long-term demand. Right? So if you give it away for free, a year later, or actually I think the test was about 6 months later, then they tried selling the bed nets. And so the idea is if you've given away for free, and people then think, oh, stuff is always going to be free, so you create this dependency issue, then 6 months later, you should see those people being less likely to buy the bed nets than another group that was never given them or that was sold them.
I see. What you're testing is whether or not you've created in people's minds the anticipation of, hey, this is something you get for free. It's not really worth paying for. Now that you're asking me to pay for it, forget it.
Exactly. That's the heart of the dependency issue is in this particular example. So the evidence did not find that was true at all. In fact, found the exact opposite. Give it away for free, and more people were willing to buy it 6 months later. So why is that? People didn't know the benefits and costs of a bed net. So it's the same reason why you go to a grocery store and they give away free samples. They're doing that they're not giving away free Ritz crackers. Right? That everyone knows what a Ritz cracker is. They're giving you free stuff to stick on the Ritz cracker. The stuff they're sticking on it is new to you. You need to learn whether you like that or not. So they give that away to you for free so you can see if you like it. And then presumably enough people like it and then buy it. Right? They're not selling more Ritz crackers by doing this little thing. Right? Same thing with the bed net. People actually didn't know the full benefits and costs of using the bed net. Getting it for free allowed them to get that information, and then demand went up.
Let me be a skeptic here, because that's sort of my profession as a journalist. Were there enough people? Is it a large enough sample, statistical sample? Can you say for sure that that's really how people were reacting, or did one group of researchers happen to find this in one particular study?
Okay, so there's two different issues you just raised. I'm going to try to separate them out. Okay. One is about the sample size of an existing study. And saying, was it statistically sound? And they're definitely yes. This thing was, I'm not going to be able to give you numbers, but it was thousands of people.
Thousands.
And it was across many different villages throughout Kenya.
All right.
So that was a very large study.
Well,
But the second question you pose is actually a really important question, and these are different, which is now, can we take the lessons from there and go somewhere else? And will those lessons hold elsewhere? And that requires understanding something about the why as to whether it's working. The why as to why something works. And when you answer that question well, you actually have some understanding of what the underlying issues are in a particular setting to be able to then
let me just ask, elsewhere meaning Tanzania. Elsewhere, another country.
Could be Tanzania, it could be Kenya 4 years later. Maybe times have changed.
Right.
So, and it's not to say that everything always has to have brand new research every time you want to answer a question, but we need to understand something about what the limits are for when we can take results from research and say, now take this to policy and go do this.
Uh-huh.
And some things that we test, we find have tremendous resilience across sites. So a different study that we've done, for instance, we've done 6 tests in 6 different countries of a very, very similar program. Found strikingly similar results across all 6. And
For the bed nets?
no, totally different program.
what
I'm
was-
just giving you an example of
Okay.
like going from one site to another site to another site.
I just want to know what it is.
In this case, it is a very integrated program that is providing a household. First of all, it identifies the ultra poor households that are so poor that they're not getting services from things like credit programs and things like that that try to help build income for the world's poorest. So it works with the households that are really at the really poorest kind of tranche of society.
The poorest people in the world.
Basically, yeah. I mean, I don't want to say it like that in the sense that, there's certainly other countries that we didn't hit, but it's going into Honduras, Peru, Pakistan, India, Ethiopia, Ghana were the 6 countries we went to. Within each of those are very poor countries overall, but even within those countries, we then went to poor areas, poor geographies, poor states. Households receive a package of services. In this case, it was in Peru, they received guinea pigs, which are commonly eaten. It's a delicacy, but it's also
The little cute guinea pig that runs in the little...
They taste good. They're very plump, and they're eaten all throughout.
Well,
the
if they're
world.
not running, they're particularly plump, I
And
suppose.
so you can see them served in fancy restaurants in Lima, but you also see them served as street food in rural areas. And so in Ghana, it was goats. In India, it was a cow. Different things in different places, but a productive asset is actually given to the household, not lent. So they get about $200 to $300 worth of a productive asset.
But in India, the cow is not getting eaten, right?
No, then it's for milk.
Oh, okay.
Milk and dung.
And but you want to explain dung? I mean, it's...
Poop.
Yeah, but cow poop
Fertilizer.
is
Becomes fertilizer.
used in furnaces. Well, it's used
And
for
that's
both.
Both, yeah.
So
Both.
actually, so they pad it together and put it in a furnace to heat themselves at night. I mean, heat the house.
So it was providing a productive asset, providing training in how to rear this. We went into households, for instance, in Peru, and a lot of households would have a guinea pig running around the floor. But the program showed them how to like optimize and how they rear the guinea pigs and keeping the boys separated, things like this.
So that the guinea pigs don't fight each other, you mean?
Exactly. And so then they can multiply and get plumper. But if you put the boys near each other, then they fight and, doesn't do so well.
So part of this program, part of this program is literally teaching very poor people things like guinea pig raising,
Exactly.
so that they have more guinea pig to eat at the end of the
and sell.
Well, all right.
Yeah.
Eat and sell at the end of the day,
Yep.
month, year, whatever.
Yep. And it was different things in different countries. In Ethiopia, it was a lot of beekeeping, which is something that you can do very well there, but it's not so common that everybody knew how to do it. In some places, there was something that there was a little more knowledge already. So in Ghana, it was goats and sheep were common. Most people know how to rear a goat. There might be some information about how to do it better, but they weren't that far from where they needed to be. They also provided access to a savings account, some food support for 6 months so they don't immediately go and eat the goat or eat the guinea pigs. So let them start generating an income. And then ongoing support for about 2 years in some sites.
And when you say support, what? You and I or people here in the audience go to the village in Ghana and say, how's the goat doing?
It was a local NGO in each setting that had
NGO,
non-governmental organization.
So some private charity organization.
Basically a private charity that works on a contract basis to try to do something to improve society. And they would have a field officer, someone whose job it is, and they would have a rotation every week visiting 20 households and just rotating across different households and doing that for 2 years. And what they would do in this case is actually there's a few different arguments for what they're doing and why it provides value. But one of them actually is segues to the next topic we're going to talk about, which is a question of discipline and staying on track for a plan and a goal. And the idea was that to rear these guinea pigs actually takes some time and discipline and attention to detail and making a plan and sticking with the plan.
Yeah, I would think just learning how to tell a boy guinea pig from a girl guinea pig would be.
No, it's not.
No, that's not.
So-
It's not as hard as I
don't
think.
I can't say I can do it, but I did learn from this project that I don't know how to tell the difference between a goat and a sheep very well. It's actually very hard.
A
There's
goat
little-
and a sheep?
Yeah, no, they're not so.
The sheep have wool.
No, not out in these settings.
Oh, really?
They look very similar. The trick is the tail. You have to remember the phrase "tail up goat,"
Yeah.
and goats' tails go up and sheep's tails go down. Other than that, they look the same to me.
Well, this is something you can all take away to this evening.
If you go to the Heifer website, which is a large nonprofit based in Arkansas that has programs around the world giving out animals, they actually have a little test you can take on there. Is this a sheep or a goat?
Really?
And it just makes it clear how hard it is to tell the difference between the two if you don't know what you're looking for. But the weekly visits that would take place from this NGO were very much about helping the household stay on track for discipline.
Uh-huh.
Very much think about it like, take the analog of it'd be almost like the equivalent of someone coming to your house once a week to check on your exercise and your eating and your smoking plan.
Well,
because you made a commitment to that you're going to change this aspect of your life, but it's still hard to actually fulfill that, and that's why I know we're going to get to that later.
No, we will.
but
We will
there
get
is-
to it. But I just wanted
There
to
is a
say,
relationship between these, even though they're totally different contexts.
Well, and the what I wanted to say is, I've been a economics reporter, business and economics reporter for 38 years on television, and so I've interviewed literally thousands and thousands of people, and I've been in lots of places where people are trying to improve the lot of people who are less fortunate. Programs, interventions in schools, in high schools, particularly for people who've dropped out, what I have found, I can't say that I have, that I have hundreds or even dozens of examples, but I have quite more than a few where the most successful programs are programs where there's somebody who calls you up in the morning when you aren't in class and says, "Where the hell are you?" Not necessarily "Where the hell are you?" It's not necessarily punitive. It's just this
that probably
constant.
does work better.
What?
That probably does work better.
Well, it's somebody cares about you and is on top of you all the time. That's what you're talking about here.
Exactly.
And so this program in 6 different countries, with the poorest of the poor.
And so what we found was in 5 of the 6, but the 6 that didn't work was actually reinforced the idea that the idea works. So I'll explain the 6th in a moment. But in 5 of the 6, we went back 3 years later, after the assets are transferred, and we see that the households are wealthier in terms of assets, are earning more money, are consuming more food
Than they used to, or than their neighbors?
than they, most importantly, compared to a control group. So
A group that didn't have.
Everything
like
was set
their
up as a
neighbor.
randomized trial, where some people are part of this program and some people are not. And for everything I'm telling you are comparisons of the people who received those services to people who did not.
Got it.
And so people were happier. Women had more power in the household. People were physically healthier. It was across the board. It was a very striking result. They were even more involved politically. So even some downstream effects that we weren't necessarily seeing as primary outcomes, we still saw transformations there. There's one of the sites in India now has done a follow-up at 7 years and found results got even better. So a lot of times we think programs might work for a while and then slowly dissipate.
Sure.
If anything, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing that once you get people out of this poverty trap and you give them stable income, they can grow and grow and grow.
And you said there was one that...
So there's one did not, Honduras. In Honduras, the productive asset that was transferred were chickens. It was a new type of chicken for this area of Honduras. They got sick and they died. Took some time to happen. So people actually invested in these chickens. They learned these chickens. They spent money rearing these chickens. And it turned out to be a really bad thing from a humanitarian perspective. So what we learned from this was it was obviously a sad outcome from a humanitarian perspective. But the lesson learned was actually really important, which was that the productive asset is an absolutely necessary part of this program. That if you do all those other things, but the asset that you transferred is not a good asset. Like the rest of the stuff didn't have some magic to it and make it work, regardless. Like it needed the productive asset in order to work. We do also know the other way. In Ghana, we had one treatment arm where we just gave out goats. We called it the goat drop study.
The goat drop
study, which is a joke that doesn't work in Ghana. It just didn't, yeah. But where we literally...
You didn't get a huge laugh here
no,
either.
it wasn't here. I got a couple over here.
Yeah, you got a little chuckle,
Yeah,
but I don't.
So
You
we
didn't knock 'em
literally
dead
went to
there.
villages and we dropped goats on people. I mean, not literally. We figuratively dropped goats on people.
You drop goats near people.
And yeah, we literally dropped them near them. No, we didn't drop them. We got them out of the
Got
van
it.
and out of the truck and put them down. But we gave people goats and we walked away. We did nothing more. It was the simplest thing on the planet. Right? But the question is that sufficient? Do you need all these other things to have that kind of effect? And what we found is when we just transferred goats to people, 3 years later, there was absolutely nothing different in their life.
Really? So that
So they actually, I shouldn't say it that way. It's not that simple. They had more goats, but they had less of everything else.
really?
Okay, so in total livestock was zero change compared to the control group. So the idea was that you needed some of these other things to keep people on track, to give them the ability to handle multiple activities. And without that, what happened is they accepted the goats because you gave them to them, and they still had some more goats than they had 3 years later. But meanwhile, they didn't have the capacity to handle the extra goats and some other things, and so they slowly shed some other things.
That's
But
a
in total,
very
in total, their life was, when you look at consumption, income, things like that that really matter, we saw no change 3 years later.
now that's actually a very disturbing finding. I mean, I don't know any of this. I didn't know any of this before. Because one thing that's that people on both the right and the left in this country, although there are still people at the edges, not the mainstream, but one thing that they both subscribe to, agree to, is the idea of maybe a minimum income, or just giving everybody some money. I know it's not the same as a poor village in
Right.
where was they, Ghana, but is there? Am I right to be worried that your study or this study suggests that just giving people something is
Well,
not enough ever?
No, what I would say is, so let me say two things. One is that, they did probably gain something along the way. I mean, at the very least, they got to consume some of the goat. So what we're seeing is that providing that asset transfer did not change any long-run outcomes. So it's not a solution to long-run problems. Does it mean they weren't helped in the short run by getting these goats and being able to eat better? Of course they were. I mean, they had to have been. Right? So it solved a short-run problem.
But it's not a solution to poverty.
But it's not a solution to the long run. Now, there has been programs that do cash transfers, unconditional, just, So in Kenya, for instance, and this was another study by Innovations for Poverty Action, along with a group called Give Directly, which is a nonprofit headquartered, I think, in New York, maybe San Francisco. But they work in Kenya and Uganda. Kenya is farther ahead than any other country in the world on mobile money.
Yeah,
So
on your phone.
like Venmo. Who here uses Venmo? Anyone? Not many. PayPal? If you want to send money to somebody else electronically, can you do it super easily? Raise your hand if you've ever sent money to somebody else electronically. So that's actually fairly low. In Kenya, that is 100%. And
Really?
it's not just once. It's like a daily part of life, sending money to other people.
By your cell phone.
By your cell phone. Just 5 clicks on your cell phone, boom, send you money. It's called M-Pesa. M-Pesa. And so Give Directly is basically piggybacking on that. And Give Directly, you can go to Give Directly's website, give $100, and $92 will get passed by cell phone to somebody in Kenya who is poor, who they've identified and screened. That's where the $8 is going to, is to help them identify the poorest people in Kenya. They're not hitting quite the same level of poverty that we're hitting with these others, but still a very poor level. So they've done a randomized trial on theirs to find out, okay, because a lot of people were very concerned about this type of program. They were saying, oh, what if people drink and smoke and things like this?
Yes, sure.
And
what every one of us worries about when somebody asks us for a handout on the street.
And so there's no better way to find out than just set up a test, because at the end of the day, we can kind of argue till we're blue about what will or will not happen.
Right.
The best thing to do, and this is our mantra at IPA, is to say, well, that's a good question. Let's go set up a test and find out.
Right.
So they set up a test. People got cash. Other people did not. They had a few variations. Some people got cash once a week for a year or something like that. And some people got it all at once. Some people got lots of money. Some people got a little bit of money. By a lot, it was like $1,000. which was a lot of money in this context. Saw no change whatsoever in alcohol or tobacco consumption. So it was great. There was no evidence of those types of issues. People are going to drink, they're going to drink regardless. And so it's not to say nobody drank, but giving cash did not increase that. You did see a lot of changes in home improvements. You saw investment in enterprise. So you did not see the same level of long-term increase in consumption that we see from the studies I was referring to. That more of the money does get used immediately for things like household improvements and household durable goods, which are good for households over the long run, right? I mean, 2 years later, I still get to enjoy the fact that I now have a better roof or a roof. But I'm not eating more 2 years later. Whereas when the guinea pigs and the goats and the cow program, we're actually seeing people eat more 2 years later. So there is a policy decision to trade off there, to think about. Do you want to just give cash and let people do what they want? Or do you want to do something that's deliberately targeting long-run changes in income and consumption for the household?
So now if I ask you which of those two, you have only one choice to give your money to one or the other of those programs, which would you do?
Personally, I would go with long-term income, but I do think that this is not a completely resolved and unambiguous statement. I certainly support when people say to me, should I give directly? Do you like them? I'm very supportive of that. I think it's a great charity.
I'm just interested. How many people here would, so you got two choices here, right? One is the intervention program where you teach them how to raise the guinea pigs and so forth. That's over here. And over here is the one which says you just give them the money randomly. So how many people go for this one? And how many people go for just give them the money? Almost nobody. I mean, much smaller. And an older demographic, I might add. Although it's a small sample, so I don't think that we want to read too much into that.
Yeah, can I add something here?
Yeah,
I don't
please.
think you guys should have voted on that. You didn't get one key piece of information, which is costs. Right? So, I can always tell you two programs and tell you the benefits of the two. You got to know for $100 how much good am I going to create. So let me put it this way: for $100 in the, I think you did actually get the right answer for what it's worth. I do agree, but I think it's the message I want to hopefully get across is that you need to ask for every dollar I put in, what am I getting out? Not just what do I get out, because the income program is actually very expensive. That's $1,000 a household. Okay, now it is the case. So for $1,000 a household, we're seeing an increase in consumption that is around $1,500 to $2,000 higher consumption for a $1,000 investment over time. So we're seeing roughly a doubling. For every dollar you put in, the household gets to eat $2 more. Whereas on the but that's over time. Whereas on the cash transfer program, you put in $1 and the household gets to eat 92 cents. Right? The difference is they get to choose those 92 cents immediately as they wish. And so that there is a philosophical difference, that they get full autonomy to do what they want with that, whereas the other, they don't have that autonomy to do what they want.
But your whole point here is, I mean, what you've dedicated your career to, or at least a significant part of it, is evaluating these kinds of programs in terms of the costs and the benefits,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And I asked this question the last time I talked to Dean. It was around this time of year. I guess 2 years ago, was it?
A year ago.
It was just last year?
Yeah.
Just
Maybe
last
longer.
But whatever.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, last year. No, it was last year. And I said, so what should I give my money to? My wife and I tithe. We give away 10% of our gross annual income. And I thought, well, geez, we ought to be giving it to the most effective place, and who better than to ask this guy, right? Because he's actually checked out what's the most effective. And I said to you, so do you have on your website, because he's the guy who founded this Innovations for Poverty Action. And I said, so do you have on your website a list of, make it a lot easier for me than having to research these things myself? And you said, no, we're working on it.
Right.
So now you have it? You don't have it? I looked the other day. You didn't have it
No,
yet.
we do not yet. So here's where we are on that. And there's a reason why it's a challenging question. That's a bit abstract, but it's that what we do at Innovations for Poverty Action is we do research to find out what ideas are working and what are not. And so we work to help other organizations be more effective, basically, and help the donors be more effective. But we're not actually testing a charity holistically. We're not assessing their governance. We're not assessing the charity as a whole. We're testing very specific ideas. And there's very few charities out there that map so cleanly that do one thing and just one thing only.
Which you could really test.
Right, and so that's one reason why we don't have a list like that up there. What I would say is there are two places to go: one that exists now, and one that is coming soon. One place that exists now is a group called GiveWell.
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 One word.
One word. GiveWell.org. And so they use lots of IPA's research. We're very proud of the fact that we're totally independent organizations, but they use a lot of our research to help understand what works and what doesn't, to then make assessments of other organizations. So Give Directly, as an example, is one of their favorite charities. Another one is called Evidence Action, which is actually a spin out from IPA that we incubated and spun out. IPA actually used to be on their list too, but I think rightly so. They kind of shifted away. I mean, we're a leverage play, in that people who want to give to IPA are giving because they want to leverage for the future and say we want to help make it so that evidence can be more useful. But you don't give $100 to IPA with the expectation that 92 of those dollars is going into the hands of someone with a direct program service. It's more about long-term solutions, not short-term things. Whereas GiveWell is naming the charities that right now, right here, you can send money to and feel confident that your dollars are going to be effectively used. The other thing, which we're starting soon, and hopefully December 11th we'll actually have posted our first, is a new organization I'm creating called Impact Matters. And it's an organization that is going to do reviews of charities, what we're calling impact audits, that audit a charity to understand how well is it using and producing appropriate evidence. And so it's one of the things it'll be looking at is to see how well does what this charity do map to some of the evidence that's out there from groups like IPA or others that are assessing what works and what doesn't.
And this is a particular problem. I did a story years ago on how do you, before I knew of Dean or knew him certainly personally either, and it was a story for the PBS NewsHour about effective charities or not, and the only metric, the only measure that people were using was how much of the money that the charity got back out into the world.
Right.
And the only problem with that is, suppose and this was pointed out to me by the Doctors Without Borders people who were quite annoyed at my approach, and they said, well, it's ridiculous. They said, we have a telephone bank that collects lots of money, so we spend a lot of money on people collecting money, but then we get more money in total, so why would that be bad?
Right.
And then at Oxfam, they said, well, it's not fair because we get in-kind contributions, which don't get counted as the total amount of stuff that we give away because it's not money. And so you can see all these subtleties to what I thought was when I started the story, a fairly easy way to measure what an effective charity was.
I'm glad you got off of that, because I couldn't agree more that it's an awful metric.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that was, I think, the punchline of our
anything,
story.
I think it might be negatively correlated with effectiveness.
Really?
The
more they give away,
that there's some extremes. So we did an analysis once with the entire universe of all nonprofits in the United States that were kind of serious nonprofits. So I think we put a filter of $1 million a year or more in annual revenue. So not like tiny, tiny little neighborhood things. And we wanted to know what proportion are spending more than 50% of their money on what would called overhead.
Mm-hmm. Overhead means staff, raising money, all of that.
Money, CEO, auditors, things like this, and because that's the fear that people often raise.
Yeah, sure.
And they have this perception because a lot of times there will be exposés on particular charities that are fraudulent. But the fact is, there was like 1% or 2%. I forget the number exactly, but it was a really tiny and proportion of charities that were in that category. We then looked at, I did one analysis one year, which was a little bit interesting. I took the group GiveWell that has scrubbed something like 700, 800 charities at this time. At this point, they had named something in the order of 40 or 50 charities that were standout charities at some point over 6 years. And I just looked and see it to see what is their overhead ratio. The 40 or so that they've named is
Right.
good. How does that compare to the 600 or so that they said were not good? And the overhead ratios on the ones they were naming as the standout charities were higher
Oh my
than
God.
the others.
Really?
Just by a little. But it was still, the
Still.
fact that it was even higher just shows you how useless that metric is. The fact is, it does cost more money to do a good job.
As your original story
So,
about the six
yeah.
countries suggests.
And so, we don't want to punish a group that is investing in getting it right, because that counts as overhead because of the way that it's structured. Similarly, it might just cost more money to go into really hard places. And that's a tough setting to work in, and it requires more security infrastructure, it requires more travel expenses, it requires more things that go into the overhead line item. Bottom line is, you want to think of it like a sausage. So for the total money in, what comes out? I don't really care how the sausage gets made. And there's going to be some organizations that are very cost effective and some that are not. And I don't really care what line item on the accounting reports it goes into. The other reality is it's very easy to manipulate those numbers.
Really, really interesting. Yes.
So again, it makes it that much less meaningful, and all I really care about is they have this much total revenue. What do they do with that? What is the net output of the program?
per dollar.
Per dollar spent.
Wow.
But I don't care whether it went to one thing or another.
All right. So that's the first. So let's have any questions about that, because we'll get to the next part. The second half of this is the New Year's resolutions, and which you've already introduced the idea. How do you actually stick to the resolutions that you make or want to make? But so let's questions about this part of it. Yeah.
So about 3 to 5 years ago, I invested money in this organization called Kiva.org. I was supposed to get a return on my microloan or whatever, which I don't think I ever got back. But I was wondering, whatever happened to them? I don't hear about them anymore. They kind of fell off the popular radar.
They're quite big now. I think their portfolio is around 150 million, last I heard. So what Kiva.org is, for those, I'm curious, how many people are familiar with Kiva?
KIVA.
KIVA.org.
Just a few.
So Kiva.org is basically funding microcredit at 0%. So you rather than make a donation to them, you make an investment at 0% return. Let me rephrase that. 0% is the best you can possibly do. If the loan is not paid back, then you can lose your money, right? And not all loans are paid back, but most are. Most are. No, but some of it might have come back. But they do have something in their terms and conditions. A lot of people did put in money, and then never, it got paid back, and then it was sitting in the Kiva account.
That happened to me.
And then you never said withdraw, and you never said reinvest. And there is something in the deep terms and conditions that said after 5 years of that, they can just take your money and then do good with it. And that's fine. It shouldn't be I wouldn't be too concerned. Yeah.
Well, it's an attempt to try to connect you both to the beneficiary of the loan and also to give you this sense, isn't it, that you're investing in a person as
Right.
opposed to just giving them a handout.
Exactly. So the key question is, in some sense it was doing something that a lot of other groups are doing, which was microcredit.
Little amount of money, credit, just lending, right?
But it was doing it with a really good, strong marketing arm, because it gave people that individual identifying person. You're helping Susie, Jimenez, who lives in Peru and is using your money to do the following, and she writes a little story and you get a picture of her. And that type of individual identification makes a difference for people for giving. And so they worked that very well, and they raised a lot of money really fast through that they then took that money and then invested it and on-lent it at 0% as well to many different micro-lending organizations around the world. The organizations effectively paid about 3 to 5% to get the money. They didn't pay interest, but it cost them money to take all those photos and write up all these little stories. So they ended up having to hire staff in order to do that, but that's fine. 5% is still a good net cost. The problem is that microcredit doesn't really work so well for alleviating poverty.
This, by the way,
So-
when I first talked to him was, I'd read something about this, but this was shocking because, and how many people here thought, it's also called microfinance, right? How many people here just thought before hearing any of this that microfinance was really a good idea? How many people never heard of microfinance? Oh, most people, all right. So, but anyway, among a certain crowd of
It
people,
was incredibly popular.
microfinance, this guy named Muhammad Yunus, who is from Bangladesh. He is from Bangladesh. He is the guy who's associated with, he won the Nobel Peace Prize about 7, 8 years ago.
Yep.
And just very, very prominent because this is the way to cure poverty. You give a loan to people, and with that loan, it's a group of people who together, this is back in the 90s that or early.
No, he started in the 70s.
70s,
Yeah.
By the 90s, it had come to the United States. The Clintons were big supporters of this, and you have a group of people. You lend the money. They lend the money. They lend the money amongst themselves. So they're all making sure that the money gets invested in the hair parlor or the water stand or whatever it is.
Exactly.
And it was absolutely, it was thought of as the answer or the new great answer.
Right. No, it was grossly oversold, which is unfortunate for it because it actually is a good thing, but it's just not alleviating poverty. So it was a great thing for investors to do. But from a donor perspective, there were other options. Now, Kiva's more of an investment model. So, Kiva, right, that's if you get your money back. The other thing that was striking, though, and this is where Kiva's done some really interesting work now, is they've started something called Kiva Labs. So Kiva saw the evidence that came out. A lot of it actually came out from IPA on microcredit that said, guys, this is doing good, but not great. So it's been oversold. There's still some benefits. These are important benefits. They're useful. Let the investors be happy. But meanwhile, the way that this lending process is working is very rigid. And people don't have the flexibility to really invest in the types of things that they want to because the loans require immediate repayment and don't give you any flexibility in repaying. Every week you have to make a loan payment. But the reality is a lot of people have things that happen in their lives on a given week and they can't make that loan payment. And they were underinvesting because of the fear of not being able to repay the loan. And so there were several studies that were done that were trying to explore alternative ways of lending. And Kiva Labs kind of gravitated this and has now, and we're working with them to try to develop better credit models. That it might be that the idea of credit can actually have a bigger effect, but you have to think a little bit more creatively about how to design the loan and how to roll that out in a way that allows people to make better investments. So that's something that's still out there, but I do admire Kiva for the fact that they recognize that, look, we have this machinery that is raising a lot of money, and for a very rigid model, let's use some of that for more creative work, where we can work with microlenders to explore and basically do some research and development. And so that's what Kiva Labs is, and I do like that.
One of the things I was saying to Dean before we started talking to you guys is that I became last year when I met him and I asked you, I said, where do you give your money? And you said you give half of it to IPA, right? Mm-hmm. And the nonprofit that he himself started, and then half of it, I don't remember where the other half was, but and I thought, well, I wouldn't want to be giving my money to some organization that's just looking into what's good to do, as opposed to giving it to poor people who actually need it, just what you were doing with Kiva, or what any of us do to people we know, or people who we feel are in need, or on the street, or whatever. And in the years since, I've thought about it, and when I went up on his website, on IPA's website the other day, to see whether or not you finally were listing companies, organizations, charities, and there weren't. And I started thinking about it because I was reading the research and all the different programs that IPA was looking into. And then I had this, sort of revelation or micro revelation, which is just, wait a second, and this is the word leveraging that you're using, like you lift something heavy with not very much force because you've got this lever, right? And so I thought, well, wait, it actually, my money would be being put to better use if I'm helping his organization or the organization you founded help other people be more effective and how they're distributing
Thank you.
anti-malaria mosquito nets or
It's
something.
exciting.
Any other questions? Let's have some questions here. So come right up and either one. But the weird thing is you got to look that way while you're talking to us. It's like it's almost spooky, but well, you can kind of angle yourself. Yeah, nice. But get your mouth close to that. Yeah, that's good. Oh, well, it's not going to work at all unless it gets turned on. Excellent. Yeah, that's it. You got it.
Hi, dude. I have a quick question. My question is, I know of me and my friends and a couple people I know, we were looking into companies, charities who were looking for people volunteers. And we found that in a lot of these companies, you had to pay money. Where there's you want to go help out in Africa, whatever the situation is. And a lot of them, you had to pay money in a lot of these charities for yourself to go volunteer. And I mean, I understand, you got to pay for your travel and all that. But why is that? Yeah, like I had a guidance counselor who told me, she was like, look for ones that you don't have to pay. But when you look for ones you don't have to pay, there's like none. So that's my question. And do you know of any that were like, and I know people who want to do like a lay year off, they just finished college, who want to do, for medical, whatever reasons,
Right.
and they can't find any. Besides Peace Corps and I think Jobs Corps.
I have two thoughts for you. One is I don't know much about that space. I've only experienced it once. In fact, my wife and I and our 3 children are heading to Nepal in December.
That's awesome.
And part of our time there will be rebuilding part of it will be trekking, and part of it will be rebuilding an earthquake.
Where'd you find that one?
So I found it online, but we did pay. You're right, but I'm just thinking. My one data point where I actually looked into this for myself, we did pay $400 to the charity, alongside the going, right? So that was part of the fee. So I hear you. That's the way that my one data point is consistent with what you're finding. The why, my hunch is very simple. I have two thoughts as to why. One is it does cost money. I mean, someone there has to organize the whole thing. Someone has to organize your trip. They have to make it so that you land and someone greets you and you know where to go, and there's a supervisor kind of helping to make sure that you're actually providing some value in the process, which is what you want to do, right? So, but that doesn't come for free, right? And so there's some employee there in if you're going to Ghana, that it needs to be hired to manage this process, and that cost has to be covered by someone. And so that's probably their model for doing it. So I don't know what to tell you about where to go that has that covered from elsewhere. In theory, I'm sure there's some place that exists that somehow gets a donor to say, no, we'll cover all the fixed costs so that you can just get free volunteers.
I know the Peace Corps does. Like
But
that's kind
but that's a government. That's a government aid program. I mean, that's the U.S. government paying.
Yeah.
So that is different.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other question we had? Yes, please.
No, please go up to the microphone.
Get that much more direct.
In principle, they can't hear you, but
I'm gonna
look
try to
that way, sort of.
tie in a couple points here, because I feel like comparing when you talk about give directly or the goat drop, what's the objective of all charities? Is it independence? Give directly is not giving independence. If they need it if it's either an income level up to just maintain at that level, based on the total revenue. So my question is really, what's the objective of charity and all charities?
Let's take them one at a time.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's enough of a question for the
I
next
have
4 hours.
I have a very short answer.
Okay.
Which is it depends on the charity, right? It is important that charities articulate an answer to your question, but it shouldn't be the case that all charities have the same answer. Right? I mean, that's the world's not that
So
simple.
there is building a dependence then.
No. What I mean is different charities can have different answers in the sense
Okay.
that there could be a charity that's working to improve the education. Their goal is to improve schools so that children can learn more. That's their objective. That's their goal, and that's what we should measure them on. There might be others that are saying our goal is to increase long-term income. Well, then that becomes our metric. There might be others that say, no, we just want to help people in the worst possible times they're in, so that they have better support in that world's worst spot that they find themselves in. So for them, short-run food, ability to eat, and ability to not go to bed hungry would be the right measure. Right? It depends on each, and I'm not gonna. I don't like passing judgment and saying, oh, like, you know, this problem is so much. I mean, there's many charities out there. I mean, I guess there's some passing judgment. I don't want to say I'd never do that, but there's a lot of problems out there that one can tackle. And there's a lot of charities out there that are trying to tackle different problems. When donors say to me, which one should I do? Usually my general feeling is that people choose causes with their heart. And my goal is to not change that, but to help people who, once they've chosen a cause, can then choose an effective charity at that. Right? So if your passion is education, well, there's a group in India called Pratham. I think they're great. They're a very evidence-based organization. And they're working dedicated to education issues. If your issue is health, you know, then I can give you some other names, things like that.
Okay. That's good. I answered it. One more thing.
Yeah. Get closer to the mic.
Impact matters.
Get closer to the mic.
Impact matters compared to Charity Navigator.
Right.
How are they? I've only known of Charity Navigator.
Right.
So what does Impact Matters do?
So, and GiveWell is the other one that I can tell you more about. I mean, Impact Matters, we're literally just launching it, so there's nothing public yet. Charity Navigator is doing what Paul was referring to earlier.
Yes,
they're just looking at the overhead ratios. Okay. I think Charity Navigator is fine if you get a telemarketer calling you up to try to raise money from you, to then quickly look and see if they're fraudulent. They're not telling you whether they're effective. They're going to weed out the 1% that are bad, and that's it. But they will give stars, and they will make attempts at rates between 2, 3, and 4 stars, and I think that should be ignored. I use them to identify the fraud. GiveWell, on the other hand, is if your goal is to say, you know what, I just want to rely on people who have spent a hordes amount of time and really a deep dive, and I want to be as effective as I can, and I'm agnostic to what country that's in, what cause that's in, I just want to do the most good I can, then I would say go to GiveWell. Impact Matters. We're not launched yet, so it's hard for me to say what to go to and do. So it's better to ask me in a year. But our hope is with Impact Matters that we'll basically be able to take people who say, what's your cause? And within that cause, here's some charities to go to. Whereas with GiveWell, you can't do that because they're only naming 4 charities.
And where I started out was with Charity Navigator, and I've now given that up for the very reasons that Dean has explained, as he explained them to me. Oh, so all right. We have one more question on this, and that because I want to get to the resolution thing. How do you keep your New Year's resolutions? Because this this will blow you away.
I was wondering how you started your charity.
You mean how or why?
Both.
By charity, you mean IPA?
You
right?
mean IPA?
Yeah.
Innovations for Poverty Action.
So the why is the kind of, in a sense, the easier answer. Well, I mean, both. And it was because there was a dearth of information out there about what was working and what was not in developing country projects. There was a group of academics that were interested in doing that. I was part of that, but we had no entity that was going to actually operate on the ground in all these different countries, helping us put these studies together, and then taking the ideas that were successful and bringing them to fruition, taking them to scale, taking them to government, taking them to other charities. And so those were the 2 big voids that I felt existed when I finished graduate school in 2002. And so that's why I started it. The how, simply put, was I sent an email to my advisors, said, here's what I want to do. I know we all share the beliefs in these things. What do you think of a new organization of this? Would you join the board? And I literally hired a free lawyer to create an organization and got some grants and stuck it in there and started little by little by little. We grew very fast. We're now, I started it 13 years ago. We're now at $40 million a year in annual revenue and 1,000 employees.
That's great.
So it kind of grew yeah, it grew exponentially for a while. It hasn't grown much in the last couple of years, which is a good thing. We've gotten much better in the past couple of years. We've just improved a lot, but we have not grown, which is good. So.
And it's a New Haven organization, right?
Yep.
Great. So now, let's do the second part here, which is, and you just tell me when you got to go. So what's the deal you do with your friend when you don't want to eat too
dessert.
much?
Yeah,
eat dessert.
Right. So here's the thing. I like wine and I like desserts. And I know that if I go
Is
to...
your family, your wife here?
Yep, it's right there.
So we actually have somebody who can verify.
Yeah, although I won't do it with my wife because we, it doesn't make sense for us to trade money.
No, but we know you're telling the truth because we have a person here who can say, no, that's not true.
So I would do this with you. I think I can trust you to take my money. I need someone who I can trust to enforce.
Right, because I can't just say, "I don't forget about it."
Yeah. If you're, just that person. So I would say to you at the beginning of the meal, if we went out for dinner, and we're deciding whether to get wine, and I would go through the following thought process. I would say, well, I liked wine, but I really don't want to eat dessert. I really want to stay well behaved and have a nice salad and some fish and whatnot. Problem is, if I drink half a bottle of wine, when the dessert menu comes,
yeah. You can tell how many people have been there on this one. Here's the one where everybody raises their hand.
I know I'm going to,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can swear now I'll resist, but then, when it comes, the dessert menu comes, I'll get tempted. So I don't order if I don't do anything, what I'll do is I'll just say, well, I'll skip the wine. So specifically because I don't want to have the dessert.
Right.
Which is a real shame because my true sweet spot is to drink the wine and not dessert. That's my best outcome, right? But I don't drink the wine because I don't want to eat the dessert. So then the best outcome, what I end up doing is I'll say to you, okay, here's the deal. Let's order wine. But if I order dessert, then I pay you $100.
I mean, you actually do this.
And I've done this with friends many times. Again, it has to be a friend that I trust that will actually enforce against me and demand the money. Then when the dessert menu comes, even if I've had a whole bottle of wine, I'm not going to spend $110 on dessert. I mean, that's a bit crazy. I don't care how good it is, right? And so it's very easy at that point. I don't eat the dessert. So then I can have my wine. I've never had to pay anybody this money. I get my wine and I don't eat the dessert, and I'm happy.
So now, how have you now created the technology that allows them to do the same thing, not necessarily with wine and dessert, but let's say with, well, I don't know, whatever.
Exactly. So I started a website in 2008 called Stick, S-T-I-C-K-K. So it's the word stick with an extra K.
So that the K sticks.
And the second K is shorthand for contract. I realize C to K, but if you're in law school, I learned this when I was around 10 years old, and I was helping my mother study in law school. That in shorthand, when you're taking notes in class, they would write contract as a backwards K. So stick K is sticking with a contract. You can go on the website, and you can say, I will lose weight, exercise more, not smoke. Or there's custom goals. People can write lots of creative things. We have some really creative goals that people will write. I commit to speak more slowly to foreigners in New York City. To speak more slowly to foreigners in New York City. Someone wrote a $100 contract committing to that. Lots of relationship contracts. One of my favorites was someone who committed to not dating any more losers. And you name someone as a referee. That person gets to decide. So that would be the equivalent of us doing this. I could do this right at dinner, like in 2 seconds. Like we were sitting there on my phone, could write the contract, and I'd make you the referee. And then you, at the end of the meal, can actually declare whether I succeeded or failed. Did I eat the dessert or not? And if I failed, you get the money. So I could set it up where you actually had control of that process to extract the money from me.
Right.
So in the case of the dating losers, the person actually had a referee, someone named Susie, who got to decide whether any of her dates were losers or not. I don't know who this person is. It's just. And the money goes to, you can choose where the money goes. So you can write a contract. I could do the exact thing I just described for dessert with you. So I can say, you're my recipient of the money, and then we write a contract.
Wait, you see, go up on the website.
Right.
You say, I'm not going to have dessert ever again
Right.
Anytime I have dessert, I'm going to give Paul Salman $100?
I could do that, and I can make you a referee, and then if you ever see me eating dessert, you can click fail and collect $100 from me.
Well, this is going to be a real problem for my life to be monitoring your every restaurant meal. I mean,
realistically, that contract wouldn't work because of that. But we
Okay.
could do it over one meal very easily.
Yes,
where I could
sure.
write
Oh,
a
sure.
contract on this meal.
Yeah, sure.
And then you would have the power at the end of the meal to just say yes or no, I succeeded.
but on the website, how does it work?
No, that could be on. You could do it on an app. I mean, it's the same thing. The app is same as the website.
Oh, you mean so we could do it for one given meal?
Yeah, you can do that. You can also write a contract that says every week I will exercise 4 times, and you might do this with a friend, where you holding each other accountable. The money doesn't always go to a third party. In fact, the most popular option is to choose the anti-charity. And this
Anti-charity.
And this is the charity you hate. And so here we take 10 politically polarizing charities and let you choose the opposite side. Whatever you are, you can go the other way. So we have abortion, and we have both sides of the debate, gun control, environmental.
Environmental? You mean there's some pro-pollution site?
They're basically groups funded by the oil and gas industry that try promoting
Oh,
the
the
idea
coal.
that climate change is
Oh,
a myth.
climate change is a fraud.
And there are
I see.
501c3s that do that. The IRS does not pass judgment on whether a charity is good or not. They just so that's and I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not sure we would want the government doing that.
So I can pledge.
You can also do the super PACs. The super PACs on both sides.
So what's a charity? What's something you really hate? In the black hat. What? Yeah. A group you just hate. The worst possible. Well, I mean, that you never want to see your money go to.
So we don't let people do that. People kept asking us for the American Nazi Party and things like that.
Oh yeah.
And Ku Klux Klan and things of this nature. And we're like, look, we got to actually send the money. So it'd be like writing the contract with you, but you have to have the power to take the money, and I have to be willing at the end of the day to actually let you have my money.
Uh-huh.
Right? If someone wrote a contract to American Nazi Party or Ku Klux Klan and lost, like we at Stick would have to send the money. We're not willing to do that. There's a limit to our.
All right, fair enough. All right.
So all of the charities that are up there, it's like the super PACs. And it's not to say, I'm not going to reveal my preferences, but to say I'm not happy about some of the checks that go out, but it's not the American Nazi Party.
All right. So would you be very unhappy if your money went to some pro-gun control organization? Okay. So that would be an example. So she makes a contract.
So you could write a contract to the NRA, National Rifle Association, which is fighting against gun control laws. And so then if you don't succeed, your money goes to the NRA.
Well,
the NRA is one of them.
But you have to have a monitor. I mean, so this is, she wants to, I don't know, talk more slowly to foreigners in New York City. That's my favorite so far. So she wants to talk, so who's gonna monitor to see whether or not she's talking more slowly to foreigners in New York City?
So this is, in a sense, we've created a vehicle that allows people have to come up with those kind of systems, right? So it might be a friend who you're committed to doing something with, and you two agree together, let's do this together, and then you become each other's monitors. A lot of people will use their spouse. A lot of times it'll use a parent or a child. It does need to be someone who can observe your actual choices and see whether you're doing it or not.
And
a lot of people actually choose to do it. People do use it in classroom settings too. We see a lot of academic contexts. I will do my homework on time. I will study at least 4 hours for my test. I know there's a class at Harvard Business School that uses it every year. And they use it as part of the teaching thing about the concept, but then they actually have all the students write contracts.
Really? Wow.
You do. You could put your credit card. A lot of people don't put money at stake, and it still can work, right? It's still like I could write a contract, and it just blasts to the world if I succeed or not, and my reputation's at stake. And so for a lot of people, that might be more effective for some people than $10 or $20 or $100. Some people have written fairly big contracts too.
What's the biggest?
Above 10,000, I don't think we let get written. So 10,000.
$10,000?
Yeah, 10,000 is the cap for what we allow.
And somebody actually said
yeah, we definitely have seen contracts that big. I don't know if we've seen anybody lose at that big, but But we have seen contracts that big. I don't know if we've gotten over where but we don't allow over without them emailing us, and I don't know whether. I can't answer the question as to whether-
right.
I'm not. I actually don't. I donated my interest. I'm not actually officially involved anymore. I care a lot about it, and I work with them to do research to learn how to make it work better. But I'm not actually part of it anymore.
Well, so I guess that. Yes, please.
It's up to you. You total control of your privacy.
The
there.
question was, do
A
other
lot of
people know?
a lot of people make it very private. A lot of people make it public, but they'll leave out they'll make it private their weight, if it's a weight loss contract, so that you can say the concept of a contract on weight is public, but I don't want the world knowing what I weigh, and because you do have to each week report if you say I'm going to lose a pound a week for 10 weeks.
Now, and so I'll ask anybody else here who has a question, but the question I want to know is, so how effective is it and how long-lasting is it? I remember having a bet with a friend of mine where we were going to both lose weight, and we both were so competitive that we made weight because one was going to pay the other, take him to Europe or some, we made it some high-stakes thing. And, of course, we both made weight, and I swear to God I'm heavier now than I've ever been in my life. Now, that was many years ago, but
So weight loss is the hardest one out there. So there's very few things out there. In fact, I'm not aware of lots of things have been shown to help people lose weight, and unless it's a continuous thing, everything always has a bounce back on weight. On some other areas, we've seen long-term effects. So smoking, for instance, I've done a study in the Philippines, for instance, which showed that writing this type of contract can help people stop smoking and lasted 6 months after the contracts were over. Same thing we've seen exercise, that you get people in the habit of exercise with some incentive contracts, and then long-run behavior can change. Weight loss is the hardest nut to crack, no pun intended.
Questions? Other questions? But in general, this works.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's keys to making it work better. So there's, I think two of the lessons that I often will discuss are be realistic and be specific. I think are the two lessons to writing successful contracts. So I have a good list of contracts that are successful and unsuccessful, showing you ones that are realistic and not. So that are more out there. Like there's some that are very clear about weight loss and smoking, but that are more of the custom goals. So for instance, there's someone who wrote a contract that said, starting 1 month from now, I will start saving $200 a month for my children's college education. Very nice and specific, very realistic. My favorite one that failed on both of these was someone wrote a contract to be a millionaire, but misspelled millionaire. And their details for how they were going to get there, it simply said, be a millionaire. It was like, okay, you are not realistic and you lacked details. This contract did not succeed.
Who is that person going to pay?
I don't. No. I don't think that person had money at stake, but it did not succeed.
I was going to say, what a great, I'm going to be a millionaire, or I'm going to pay
ideally,
the National Rifle Association $1,000.
Right.
Not a good way to become a millionaire. But
those are the two important things are being realistic and being detailed.
And
another one that was one of my favorite ones that was being realistic was someone, and this one did succeed, was someone who wrote a contract to smoke less weed Monday through Friday. So again, learning how to be realistic is important.
And what was that? Was that person going to pay?
I don't know where the money was going to go to, but the person did report success.
Some district attorney somewhere who arrested every marijuana user in history. You can imagine what it was.
But you can imagine the same thing on exercise and weight loss. If you write a contract that says I'm going to lose 10 pounds a week, I mean, that's actually unhealthy, but also unrealistic.
Excellent. So the last word here is, for people who are going to make New Year's resolutions, is their best bet to go up on the Stick app?
I think it's a great idea. And I think there's a link between the two as well, the two topics we've been talking about. A lot of people, when it comes time to, a lot of people do their holiday giving in December and find that they're not giving as much money as they'd like to have given, but they just don't have the money. So one of the contracts that I think would be very interesting to see people do is engage more by writing contracts to give, saying I commit every month to spending an hour thinking about where to give, and give $100 or whatever the amount is that's appropriate for that person that is within their comfort zone.
Or otherwise, I will give money to somebody I don't
that
like.
you hate. Exactly, it could be there.
Well,
And
there
so
it
that's
is.
a commitment each month to go in and think about it. And I haven't seen a study on this, but my hunch is that would actually make that person hopefully much happier. They would feel more fulfilled each month, having gone through this thought process, feeling attached and committed to some cause that they do have interest in, but just never quite find the time to do. And it's a way of staying on task to make sure that that type of giving becomes part of one's life.
And one of the great findings, this is the last thing I'll say, is one of the great findings of behavioral economics or behavioral psychology is that actually you get more happiness out of giving or spending for somebody else than spending for yourself, right?
Yep, I've seen that.
So there you go. Win, win, win. Dean
Great.
Karlan, thank you
Great.
very much.
Great, thanks for having me.
I did want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you very much, Professor Karlan and Professor Salman. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, I remember you told me. Yeah.
It's like it's $100 a month, and it's more. It's not $100.
Well, both though, probably.
I didn't realize you were driving down from Boston. I wish, if I'd known, we could have told you we could have gone and done something.
Oh no,
I feel bad you came all the way.
Oh no. I come down every Monday. Because
every Monday.
Well, that's because I'm teaching in the Grand Strategy program, and I also teach in